A little late, but never. Better late than never? Is that the thing? Okay. We need to... Yeah, we got to reverse these things. First things first. Crazy encounter where I was talking with the channel with my brother in an Uber, and the Uber driver pointed me to this site for us to get a brand personality quiz. So we got to do a brand personality quiz. And then we can get back to the book that we were reading. Behave. Oh, perfect. Just starts us right there. Okay, so we'll start there. And yeah, let's see. Is this gonna work? Take the quiz. Take the quiz. What does your business care about the most? I think help. Oh. Okay, I went too fast. I should have looked at all the other. Changing the status quo, yes, but making the world a better place, yes, but helping others, how is this going to be different? Yo, Adam tuned in, what's good? Welcome back. Seeking utopia, is that what we're doing here? Enjoying and exploring life, connecting with people. Okay, so connecting with people is a huge one, but helping others is a huge one. Really, it's making the world a better place, but I think helping others is going to be the closest one. This is the highest one that we've got here. What color represents the brand? White, right? White and black. I have a neuroscience question. Oh, I have neuroscience questions. Hell yeah. Let them rip. Okay, I'm gonna say white, just because that's kind of our shtick here. It's just very simple white. Now, which word best describes your brand? Liberation, no. Power, no. Mastery, maybe, if we're talking like mastery over your own agency and your ability to navigate your life. Intimacy, no. Enjoyment, no. Belonging, a life that feels purposeful might have a feeling of belonging. Service, ooh, this could be a good word to describe the brand. Control, no. Well, I guess control over that, but I guess for the business, I would still go service. We're trying some sort of innovation. Understanding's huge though. Freedom. Oh. Understanding and freedom. Service. Understanding. Freedom. Audio low? Is the audio low? I don't think I changed anything. I could be wrong. Good morning though. Good morning. Okay, what is this brand all about? What is our channel about? Is it about service, understanding, or freedom? I'm going to say understanding is kind of the big deal. You kind of get freedom through understanding. So, freedom, though, is kind of crazy. But you know what? There's a lot of responsibility to go along with this. But we could say service, because technically the brand is about, like, now let's go understanding here. How would you describe the personality of your brand? Being open to new experiences? Absolutely. Oh my gosh, are we getting, we've got the big five, right? All right, we've got openness, we got conscientiousness, we got introversion, extroversion, we've got neuroticism, and then we got agreeableness. We've got our big five right here. So what would be the big five trait that we care most about here? Can't see the lower half of the list. Oh, I see. Okay, so we should just set it up on the side here. Sorry about that. Okay. I think openness is probably it. We wouldn't go extroversion. We wouldn't go conscientiousness, but planning ahead. No, I don't know. Willingness to help, no. Planning ahead, like this would be pretty apt, but I feel like openness, because in order to get through all the material we talk about, it requires a little bit of an openness. And we're always exploring stuff, so I'm going to do that one. Which of these statements resonates with your brand the most? Rules are made to be broken. I don't think that would be the case. I mean, we could always talk about, how rules are merely rules, like norms. And norms are kind of, it's not that they're made to be broken, though. Okay. Anything is possible. That's certainly not what we're trying to say. Where there's a will, there's a way. That's not quite it, but we're getting closer. I only have eyes for you. Nope. Life is a carnival. Nope. We're all human. That is a big topic here. Work hard, stay humble. Not quite. Never give up. I dare you. If it can be imagined, it can be created. We're not that far. Life is simple and simplicity is elegant, right? The truth will set you free. Oh my gosh. What do we do? So it's more so it's almost like the truth will set you free, honestly. Even though we don't we're in that position where we don't abide by this idea of an absolute truth, but that being said, like, for greater understanding can set you free, but it could also point out your responsibilities. So, it gives you more ability. It's not necessarily going to set you free, but it gives you the ability to be free. So it's not going to be life is simple. It can't. So if it can be imagined, it can be created. So possibilities that we can imagine we can do. That's a little bit more clear than anything is possible. But then what about where there's a will, there's a way? We might as well go with that one over if it can be imagined, because there's a lot of things we can imagine that we just cannot create, unfortunately. But this one's a little ambiguous as to whether or not we're able to do the things that we believe to be impossible. And there's this kind of forward momentum of like, there's a way, but like, are we going to get to the actual thing that you want right now? Or, as you keep willing yourself forward, you're going to figure out what the new landscape is and what things you can do, what things you found out you can't do. So I'm gonna go with that one. But we're all humans, pretty good as well. Okay, what do we got? Which of these brands is your North Star? Oh my gosh. I don't think we want any of these brands as our North Star. But maybe Dove? No. M&M's is kind of cool. I think it's gonna have to be Dove here. I like the simplicity here. We got a little dove. We got a bird. Birds are right on our brand. Never give up. I dare you. Always love a challenge to take it easy. Where there's a will, there's a way. Never works for someone with explosive diarrhea. Yikes. Yeah, I mean, just in general, like, there's a lot of constraints on our life that makes it so that we can't just will anything to happen. All right, what's your brand's biggest weakness? Perhaps overly stubborn. For people that have watched me a while, I can be a little stubborn. Too optimistic. Perhaps this is another one. This could be an issue. Hard to open up about feelings? No. Constantly trying to please others? No. Trying too hard to be liked? No. Losing yourself trying to blend in? Nope. Being exploited? I think we're going to keep this under wraps. I don't think we're going to try to get into a position where we could be exploited. Perfectionism could be a flaw, but you know what? I'm putting out videos that I don't think are perfect. So, you know what? I think we're starting right here. Too self-involved, overly cautious, too critical of self and others, taking things too far. All right, we're going to have to go with too optimistic. Yeah. Oh, geez. If our brand was a person, who would it be? Okay. Oh, Stan, I think I want to ask a couple questions on the physical aspects of the brain. They are not necessarily on a single issue or topic, but looking for descriptive knowledge. Okay. Do you have specific questions, or are you just interested in learning more about the physical makeup of the brain? What are we talking about here? What brand? The backstory here is that I was talking with my brother about this channel, and my brother's been concerned that because I we talk about stuff that's really in the weeds, it's going to be difficult to actually have like a larger audience, which I think is going to be something we worry about once we learn all the stuff that we need to learn. Like right now, I'm really concerned about learning all the content that needs to be in part 2 and part 3, and just having that in my own mind to organize it. So really, this channel is going to be a learning channel for like the next year or two. But then after that, we can be a full-on educational channel. And that's when we can start making our stuff a lot more accessible. And we could obviously do that in the meantime. But we can start making like really simple videos for almost anyone. But anyway, the Uber driver overheard us, and she suggested we take this quiz, which is I think like from her own company. I think this is her own quiz. So that's what I did. Okay. So the brand is the channel, right? All right, baseball bat to the noggin equals bad. In no specific question. Oh, no specific questions. Yes, interested in the physical makeup of the brain. Okay, well, yeah, I would highly recommend 7.5 lessons about the brain. This is the one that I read recently that like does not go deep into the weeds. Like this is telling you like functionally what's important to know about the brain right now. Like a modern viewing of this. Okay, let's go to Goodreads. Have you ever wondered why you have a brain? Let renowned neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett demystify that big gray blob between your ears in 7 short essays plus a bite-sized story about how brains evolved. This slim, entertaining, and accessible collection reveals mind-expanding lessons from the front lines of neuroscience research. You'll learn where brains come from, how they're structured, and why it matters, and how yours works in tandem with other brains to create everything you experience. Along the way, you'll also learn to dismiss popular myths, such as the idea of a lizard brain and the alleged battle between thoughts and emotions, or even between nature and nurture to determine your behavior. So this is really going over the heavy hitters. This is touching all the major topics that I think are really important to know about our contemporary understanding of the brain. And in a very, very like accessible, high-level way where you're not actually going deep into, you know, neuro chemistry or, you know, all the itty bitty stuff. We'll be asking who Gandhi and Marilyn are. Oh, is this regarding the this guy? Okay, are we spiritual and charismatic? Kind of, but I don't want to be associated with Oprah. Magnetic and romantic. No. Legendary and dominant. Nah. Virtuous and honest. Perhaps. Brave and competitive. Nah. Pioneering and courageous. Maybe, but I don't know how courageous this actually is. Original and inventive. Sure, but I don't think that's our top. Humorous and over the top. Nah. Wise and thoughtful. Maybe. Defiant and counterculture. Nah. Ordinary guy and loyal. Altruistic and compassionate. Oh, okay. So we are going to either go with virtuous and honest, wise and thoughtful, or altruistic and compassionate. Oh. What do we think for this one? I'd always figured the brain just being a more complex signaling organ as part of the nervous system. Right. Right. It certainly is. It's quite complex. But then, there's aspects of that complexity that are important for how we think about our own experience, how we think about our behavior, other people's behavior. Pick Amber Heard, hollow and blood-sucking. Nice. Okay. We haven't done anything virtuous yet, so let's not do that. This has been guided by altruism and compassion, but we're not there yet. So far, all we've been is wise and thoughtful, so maybe we just run with that. But I don't know if, like, ideally this is the ultimate goal here. So maybe we just go with this, because this is really what we want to try to be grounded by. We shouldn't take up the identity of being wise and thoughtful. We should take up the identity of being thoughtful, but yeah, let's do this. Okay. Last one. Compared to your competitors, which we have so many. Your brand is the most. I don't know. I don't even know who our competitors are. I don't even know what a competitor to our channel would even mean. I'd pick Jim Carrey for obvious reasons. Nice. Romantic. Okay, is there romantic here? We are more romantic, perhaps. Adventurous. Honestly, this might be it. We are quite adventurous. And the only reason I would say adventurous is because of the scope of what we're trying to do in this document. Like, I just don't think people are doing this because it's insane. It's just it's not realistic. And I'm just willing to spend years on it. All right, original, sure. Successful, not quite. Creative, sure. Maybe. Fun, maybe. We'll see. Popular, definitely not. Caring, sure. Radical, no. Knowledgeable, definitely not. Romantic, nah. I'm going to just go wholesome, cool. Effective, I'm going to go adventurous. I think we're going adventurous. Okay, here we go. The caregiver, aka the nurturer, supporter, advocate. Friend, you can't help but radiate kindness. Oh, thank you. Chatting with you is like relaxing in the sunshine after a busy day. Plus, you approach business with an altruistic mindset. How can I help? What can I do for you? Clients fall for your resilient positivity. No matter the circumstance, you're there with an inspirational word of guidance. You share the spotlight on your community. You don't need to take the center stage this time. Okay. What's a drawback of generosity? Sometimes you're scared you're being taken advantage of. Maybe make sure that your business is giving as much back to you as it is to your clients and community. Sure, treat your neighbor as yourself. Ready for the next level of success? Read on for 3 exercises to begin unlocking the power of the brand's brilliant archetype. All right, this is where we get to paying. Ask yourself these big questions about your brand. Who are you? Why are you here? What sort of future do you want to create? Get to the heart of your business. Then create a voice in alignment. Consider your perfect client. Who are you trying to attract? We're more likely to purchase from folks who reflect our core values and beliefs. All right, so this is most certainly not the type of avenue that we're trying to go for this. We're not trying to like sell a company or like a product or anything, We're really not trying to sell anything. Okay, this is who I was talking to. I'm an entrepreneur, certified leadership coach, licensed finance professional, and visionary dedicated to helping small business owners curate authentic brands. With over 20 years of experience as a business owner, I'm excited to share my training, resources, and expertise with you. Ready to elevate your business? Keep reading. Using a comprehensive approach, I empower you to achieve greater success in both business and life. Through psychology-driven brand strategies for visual design and marketing, I help you define your brand and position your business for extraordinary results. My methods are both insightful and impactful. I work with a diverse range of clients, blah, 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 blah. I'm here to help build a reputable brand. Free resources. Oh my gosh, there's free resources? Wow. There's not even a way to pay. Okay. Oh, this isn't going to ask for money. That's cool. All right. I don't think that's going to be the avenue here, but Boris Krieger, business consultant version final boss. Absolutely. This quiz is a sham. I think it's just it's a means for getting you to think about your brand in a certain way. I don't think it's like it's we were talking about personality quizzes yesterday. It's not a similar type of marker as a personality the actual personality quizzes that we were talking about. This is more so like a creativity exercise, you could say. It's to get you to start thinking in that mindset. Reads like those pamphlets I get in the mail that gets sent to the trash. Jeez. Me talking in the interview be like, okay, at what level of description should one be taking when talking about the material of the brain? Obviously, by sight, there's the macro level, then reduced to smaller levels of functioning to a quantum level. But if reductionism is the theory that the thisness of a thing is necessarily its essential parts, then logically my physical body just is a quantum body system, but is a quantum body a living body? So I'm all over the spectrum and thinking about what is life. I think you can look at the brain at many different layers of abstraction. And the question is, what are you trying to get at? Like, what is your pragmatic aim in thinking about the brain or communicating something about the brain or understanding something about the brain? So you can try to look at the brain at a quantum level, but you're just going to be like, it doesn't have to be the brain at that point. Like you can, quantum physics isn't going to have some like extra special effect on the brain that gives you any insight into our behavior and knowledge. So I would say the lowest that you would want to go with the brain is molecules and cells. Just probably like lower than neurons and glial cells. I don't think you need obviously we could talk about the fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid. Like we could talk about that. We could talk about blood. But I would say that's like the lowest you need to really go, and then you could go up from there. But perhaps it's better to go top down, so you can look at the different types of functions of the brain. You could then go down to look at the actual functional networks in the brain. Yeah. I mean, I would once again recommend that book. It kind of gives a nice high level functional view that isn't just like merely a behavioral science view. Like it's still actually looking at the neuroscience underlying, underneath. Okay, abstraction by knowledge, but I want to know the ontology metaphysical level. Right. I think the more you dive into this, you're going to find that there is no like fundamental ontology that the brain gives you access to except for through consciousness. And then that points out how subjective that very knowledge is. So, yeah, I don't think by studying the brain you can get to the point where you're like, I figured out the fundamental ontology of the universe. Okay, your quantum components are configured in a distinct way like many others, but unlike others. If you're trying to define life, even biologists and science philosophers can't pin that down. Right, I think some effective ways of looking at life is to look at the what's the word? Not recursive. It's like the ability for a system to keep itself going. Maybe it's like, and then you can get to like autopoiesis. Defines a system as a network of processes that creates, maintains, and repairs its own components. This is like an aspect of this type of system. It's like a self-sustaining system. That's really life. So imagine, you just have like chemical reactions and physical reactions that, rather than just dissipating into the world or, you know, going away through entropy, you've got a system that now can sustain its own functioning despite despite entropy. And yeah, I think that's like the way of looking at life. Okay. Those only describe human and earthly life. Well, it describes even single cellular life. Like, you know, this is just life in general. Any organic system would be described that way. Now, once we get to the level of the human, like, there's so many components involved, right? We've got a bunch of virus alive. Are viruses alive? I don't know. Are viruses alive? Are generally considered non-living, existing at the edge of life as they lack the ability to independently metabolize, grow, or reproduce. They are inert particles outside of a host cell, requiring a host's machinery to function. However, their ability to evolve and replicate inside a host has sparked a long-standing scientific debate. Yeah, I mean, that's as far as I could probably go. If the viruses require the cell to live, then it's almost similar to, like, the molecules that make up a cell. Like, are the molecules alive? It's like, no, but they can only be a part of this living thing. That, so it's like a level of abstraction that allows us to actually point out that it's got this recurring system. If viruses can't survive on their own and don't have like a system like that, then I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know much about viruses. I don't know if they have specific regulation systems within them. Why those limitations for life? Oh, I don't know what limitations we're talking about here. Oh, or are you saying, like, why are we making the conceptual bounds at that point? And you know, I don't know. I was just giving like what I thought was one of the more effective explanations that I heard, or, you know, more clear. Must meet the criteria to be classified as right. It's just someone who came up, conceptualized a criteria, and that criteria seems to be coherent. So that, I mean, just to me, you know, that's all I've got. There's nothing in the universe that says that is what life is. You know, once again, like, life is a concept that we come up with. And, you know, when we think about the meaning of life, that's something that can only be, you know, thought about or accessed in our conscious experience. You know, if without a human to contemplate over what life is, there's nothing significant about any layer of abstraction in the physical world. You know, there's just processes. You just go all the way down to the most granular level, and that's it. That's all what there is. You know, there's no patterns. It's just the I don't even know if we can call it movement, or if we can call it I don't know if we could talk about time in a certain way. All right, let's get back to this stuff. We've got a book to read here. Okay, so I also spent a good amount of time today just fixing up the automatic behaviors document, getting it more organized. I think it's going to consist of how the brain automates behavior. We already read through this. This is kind of going over just how it automates behavior at each level, from the most reflexive to the highest level involving long-term memory. Then we've got the evolutionary heuristics, which is what we're on, actually, which is what I started reading yesterday. And I'm going to maybe make this a shorter subsection than than I originally imagined, and maybe this just talks about how these heuristics came about via evolution. And then it talks about how these are not necessarily good or bad. They're just what we have, and that we can, consider them, we can identify them, we can respond to them. Then we can go to affect and salience heuristics. These are like the most basic heuristics of like whatever is salient for us is what we end up experiencing. It's what we end up deciding. So there's that. And then finally we get to social heuristics, which is the discussion that we're having, where we've got these different social dynamics of us, like of usness, of belonging, of themness, of hierarchy, of obviously like sexual pressures and all that stuff. Like we have to talk about social heuristics. Then we can talk about cognitive biases, which are going to be pretty much talking about affect and salience heuristics and social heuristics, just at like the more high level of like actual cognitive biases, like the very specific concrete cognitive biases that we know and love from popular psychology. Then we can do navigating biases and heuristics. So this would be something like how we can prime ourselves to notice these, or to do something that's opposite. So we've got awareness and consider the opposite, statistical training, pre-mortem, and so anything that's here. And then we could do strategies for habits and addiction, or navigating habits and addiction, which would be the more clear topic of how you can get rid of a habit, how you can try to combat addiction. And this would be like more autonomic habits, as well as habits of thought, more complex habits. But we are still today running through these us versus them notes. The automaticity is seen another way. Okay, for reasons. Okay, I know chat moved on, but I was just thinking, so in this context of levels, I like questions about molecular bonds and chemical level and atomic level, individual atoms making up molecules. So when the brain cells, dendrites, axons bundled into tracts, myelinated axons in white matter, glial cells get to exchanging charges for a synapse, is this simply a description of atoms? No, I think that's a higher up description. Like you're past the level of abstraction of atoms. If you're talking about the brain in terms of atoms, then like you might as well be talking about your foot, or something else. Like there's no reason why we need to be talking about the level of atoms when we're at the we're at the brain, unless you're like getting really into the chemistry going on here. And perhaps you are, but usually for the chemistry happening here, you would still look at it at like a level of abstraction higher, and you would be looking for very specific chemical reactions. And so it's almost less, you don't really need to go into that deep, but you would want to look into, if you really wanted to learn the physical science of the brain, you would, you could read one of those like actual neuroscience textbooks, which talks about this process from one end to the other. The electrical aspect of neurotransmission, the chemical aspect. You could look at neuromodulation, then you can look at the glial cells taking stuff from the blood and using that to affect synapses. And there's so much stuff to know. And at all those levels, though, you really don't get a functional understanding of why any of this is happening, or what's really going on here, which is why I point towards the 7.5 lessons book, which gives you that front, like this gives you a way to prime your understanding of the brain such that you understand like why everything's doing the thing it's doing. Visualize this in the form of city traffic and roads. The city as you, whereas the individual components that make up the city, like traffic and roads, running as they always do, as the lower levels, right? The charges involved in the brain are localized. Yes, the chemistry, cytoplasm, water, ions, organelles, mitochondria, blah, 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 cytoskeleton, microtubules, actin filaments, neuro. Yep, yep. Yeah, I don't know if you like. I don't know if I would recommend anyone to like learn about the brain at that depth, unless you're just like actually really interested in chemistry and cellular biology. But usually, when people are interested in the brain, they're trying to figure out like some functional aspect of it, some like fundamental truth about how we can interpret the brain, and that would be way higher than that the discussion of the biology here. Okay. The strongest evidence that abrasive theming originates in emotions and automatic processes is that supposed rational cognitions about thems can be unconsciously manipulated. In an example cited earlier, subjects unconsciously primed about loyalty sit closer to us's and farther from them's, while those primed about equality do the opposite. In another study, subjects watched a slideshow of basic, unexciting information about a country they knew nothing about. There's a country called Moldova. For half the subjects' faces with positive expressions were flashed at subliminal speeds between slides, which we know to be less than a couple hundred milliseconds. For the other half, it was negative expressions. The former developed more positive views of the country than the latter. Conscious judgments about thems are unconsciously manipulated in the real world. Okay. So the idea, the huge idea there is that like subconscious or subliminal cues can affect whether or not you like a group or not, an out group. More or less so, we could say. That abrasive theming origins unconsciously manipulated. All right. Conscious judgments about thems are unconsciously manipulated in the real world. In an important experiment discussed in Chapter 3, morning commuters at train stations in predominantly white suburbs filled out questionnaires about political views. Then at half the stations, a pair of young Mexicans, conservatively dressed, appeared each morning for 2 weeks, chatting quietly in Spanish before boarding the train. Then commuters filled out second questionnaires. Remarkably, the presence of such pairs made people more supportive of decreasing legal immigration from Mexico and of making English the official language, and more opposed to amnesty for illegal immigrants. The manipulation was selective, not changing attitudes about Asian Americans, African Americans, or Middle Easterners. How's this for a fascinating influence on us and theming? Way below the level of awareness. Chapter 4 noted that when women are ovulating, their fusiform face areas respond more to faces, with the emotional ventromedial prefrontal cortexes responding more to men's faces in particular. This guy at Michigan State University has shown that white women, when ovulating, have more negative attitudes toward African American men. Jeez. Thus, the intensity of us and theming is being modulated by hormones. Our feelings about thems can be shaped by subterranean forces we haven't a clue about. Crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Okay. Yo, Darmadon, what's good? Brainwashing. We are brainwashing. Am I brainwashing or am I getting brainwashed here? Got to get washed in the blood. Whoa. Reading the part where they tested brainwashing. Oh, you're saying that people are... Yeah, okay, the subjects here are getting brainwashed via subconscious or subliminal cues. Automatic features of us and theming can extend to magical contagion, a belief that the essentialism of people can transfer to objects or other organisms. This can be a plus or a minus. One study showed that washing a sweater worn by JFK would decrease its value at auction, whereas sterilizing one worn by Bernie Madoff would increase its value. This is sheer irrationality. It's not like an unwashed JFK sweater still contains his magical armpit essence, while an unwashed Madoff sweater swarms with moral taint cooties. And magical contagion has occurred elsewhere. Nazis killed supposedly contaminated Jewish dogs along with their owners. Jesus. We don't have to go that deep in the document. We don't have to talk about out-group bias. I don't know. These biases can yeah, you know what we should mention. These biases can extend to associated objects or possessions would be the takeaway there. All right, the heart of cognition, catching up with affect, is, of course, rationalization. Uh-oh. This is the thing that's perhaps most important to learn. A great example of this occurred in 2000 when everyone learned the phrase hanging chads following the election of Al Gore and the Supreme Court's selection of George W. Bush. For those who missed that fun, a chad is the piece of paper knocked out of a punch card ballot when someone votes, and a hanging chad is one that doesn't completely detach. Does this justify disqualifying the vote, even though it is clear who the person voted for? And obviously, if 1 millisecond before chads reared their hanging heads, you had asked pundits what would be the hanging chad stances of the party of Reagan and trickle-down economics and the party of FDR and the Great Society, they wouldn't have had a clue. And yet, there we were, 1 millisecond post-chads, with each party passionately explaining why the view of the opposing thems threatened mom, apple pie, and the legacy of the Alamo. All right, the confirmation biases used to rationalize and justify automatic theming are numerous. Remembering supportive better than opposing evidence. Testing things in ways that can support but not negate your hypothesis. Skeptical probing outcomes you don't like more than ones you do. All things we care about here. Me and Spirit JFK are tight. Okay, let me start way back here. It's a thing Christians say, wash away sins with the blood of Jesus. Ah, I see. Right. But if reductionism is correct, the higher order functions could not exist without the lower levels, the higher levels being one of life and continued life. If this is the overall purpose, then life understood under the reductionist philosophy implies that the lowest levels is what ontologically matters. Who's saying that things that are lower level are ontologically more fundamental? And perhaps if you're a physicalist, that's what you would say. But then we have to consider, what do we mean by ontological? Are we talking about some external thing? Or are we talking about our experience of meaning? And, you know, that might be something you think about. Yeah, but who's determining what the overall purpose is? Not saying I don't know what, maybe contingently. The higher levels do not have significance to us at the psychological level of consciousness. Yeah, like we can always go to the lower levels. The lower levels is what's happening in the physical world. It's just that if we want to understand like specific aspects of our behavior, we would look at the functional levels as giving us some sense of what's going on. We wouldn't be able to know what's going on functionally in terms of our behavior or the type of thoughts that we have by looking at quantum physics and you know, energy and heat. Like, you have to look at higher levels of abstraction. They are making sense of the stuff that's more granular, but they are just a higher empirical level. Blah blah materialism. Me and Spirit JFK are tight. What are we reading, by the way? This is This is Behave by Sapolsky. This is a pretty crazy book, pretty extensive. Goes through the biology of humans at our best and our worst. More than a decade in the making, the game-changing book is Robert Sapolsky's genre-shattering attempt to answer that question as fully as... Oh, the why do we do the things we do? That question as fully as perhaps he could, looking at it from every angle. He starts by looking at the factors that bear on a person's reaction in the precise moment a behavior occurs, and then hops back in time from there in stages, ultimately ending up at the deep history of our species and its evolutionary legacy. So, the reason why we're talking about us versus them is because we've been looking at these automatic behaviors, that these like heuristics that our brain is operating on. And this is a good example of a level of abstraction that talking about atoms really doesn't help us out with. We need to look at the level of this type of clinical psychology in order to see that we have these inherent social biases. Okay, why else would they tell you to praise God after each sentence? Praise him often enough and one automatically assumes God deserves it. Don't want to be tossed in the washing machine again, now do we? Oh, Burbanes, thank you for the analogy of brain as a city. Right. It is a good analogy. Continuation from yesterday's topic, us versus them, how humans do it and why. Just wacky and goofy. Hell yeah. Are the humans, the US, or the them set? Us is as in any us. It's like a very abstract. It could be anyone from anywhere. It could be different. Us is at different levels of abstraction, right? Like right-handers. It could be literally like you get on a subway. I'm going to use the example I heard earlier. You get on a subway and there's people on one side of it looking at the other side. There's people on the other side looking at, and you might have certain biases towards the people on your side. I don't know. There's a lot of biases going on. We can only consider what biases are affecting you in the moment, but we've got science that tells us like very specific signs that we do have certain biases. Okay, smoke break. Yes, reductionist for scientific, realist, physicalist. Right. Okay. Moreover, manipulating implicit theming alters justification processes. In one study, Scottish students read about a game where Scottish participants either did or did not treat English participants unfairly. Students who read about Scots being prejudicial became more positive in their stereotypes about Scots and more negative about Brits, justifying the bias by the Scottish participants. That's a big deal. This is pointing out that, hey, like, if you're in a group that is prejudicial, your brain is going to want to be more prejudicial. So if you want to be less prejudicial, you might want to get out of that group, or at least be very mindful of the type of bias that this scenario would lead you towards. Our cognitions run to catch up with our affective selves, searching for the minute factoid or plausible fabrication that explains why we hate them. Crazy. All right, individual intergroup interactions versus group intergroup interactions. Okay. Thus, we tend to think of us as noble, loyal, and composed of distinctive individuals whose failings are due to circumstances. Thems, in contrast, seem disgusting, ridiculous, simple, homogeneous, undifferentiated, and interchangeable, all frequently backed up by rationalizations for our intuitions. That's a nice summary of what we've discussed so far. That is a picture of an individual navigating us, them, us and them in his mind. Interactions between groups tend to be more competitive and aggressive than our interactions between individual us's and them's. In the words of this person writing during World War II, the group is more arrogant, hypocritical, self-centered, and more ruthless in the pursuit of its ends than the individual. Okay, there is often an inverse relationship between levels of intra-group and inter-group aggression. In other words, groups with highly hostile interactions with neighbors tend to have minimal internal conflict. Or to spin this another way, groups with high levels of internal conflict are too distracted to focus on hostility, on others. This is why, like, people always say, like, if the aliens came, then we would all like buddy up with everyone, and that would solve, solve all prejudice. Okay, crucially, is that inverse relationship causal? Must a society be internally peaceful to muster the large-scale cooperation needed for major intergroup hostilities? Must a society suppress homicide to accomplish genocide? Or to reverse the causality, do threats from thems make societies more internally cooperative? This is a view advanced by the economist Samuel Bowles of the Santa Fe Institute, who has framed this as conflict, altruism's midwife. Stay tuned. Okay. We are the company we keep. True, absolutely. United we stand. There, I summarized the paragraph. Nice. And the truth is, you'd have individuals who would not buddy up and could work with the aliens for whatever reason, like they would continue living. Yeah, it would have to. The aliens would have to make them hate them, the aliens, more than other people. But people, if people are focused on not liking the aliens, then they can team up with other people under the same identity of fighting the aliens. All hail our alien overlords. Okay, unique realms of human us and theming. Despite other primates displaying rudimentary abstractions of us and theming, humans are in a stratosphere of uniqueness. In this section, I consider how we all belong to multiple categories of us, and their relative importance can rapidly change. All thems are not the same, and we have complex taxonomies about different types of thems and the responses they evoke. We can feel badly about us and theming and try to conceal it, and cultural mechanisms can sharpen or soften the edges of our dichotomizing. Okay, that didn't help me out too much. All right. 4, nice. Okay, multiple us's. We all belong to multiple us-them dichotomies. Sometimes one can be a surrogate for another. For example, the dichotomy of people who are or aren't knowledgeable about caviar is a good stand-in for a dichotomy about socioeconomic status. As noted, the most important thing about our membership in multiple us-thems is the ease with which their prioritizing shifts. A famed example discussed in Chapter 3 concerned math performance in Asian American women, built around the stereotypes of Asians being good at math and women not. Half the subjects were primed to think of themselves as Asian before a math test. Their scores improved. Half were primed about gender. Scores declined. Moreover, levels of activity in cortical regions involved in math skills change in parallel. Crazy. So yeah, what does it mean? The ease in which they're prioritizing shifts. I guess that's more so like that's more of a salience thing, like which is affecting you. So we also recognize that other individuals belong to multiple categories and shift which we consider most relevant. Not surprisingly, lots of that literature concerns race, with the core question being whether it is an us, them that trumps all others. Okay. I'll just kind of keep this one as well. I'm going to have to figure out how to really summarize all this stuff. Multiple us's or uses, and or alien co-conspirators get benefits like free access to alien technologies, lightsabers, and pew pew guns, right? They might try to coerce humans into liking them. That honestly is like more scary. Like aliens come from above and then like offer wealthy people or people in power with certain abilities. Perhaps they offer a country. Like if aliens come, they get to like start negotiating with countries, and you know they'll be on board. Like it's really going to be weird. I don't think it's a good thing. Were the various office probing tech, orifice probing tech, yikes, not going there. Hopefully we don't go there. And hopefully they don't come here. All right, we also recognize that other individual... Okay, wait. We already read that. The primacy of race has a lot of folk intuition appeal. First, race is a biological attribute, a conspicuous fixed identity that readily prompts essentialist thinking. This also fuels intuitions about evolution. Humans evolved under conditions where different skin color is the clearest signal that someone is a distant them. And the salience of race is seen cross-culturally. An astonishing percentage of cultures have historically made status distinctions by skin color, including in traditional cultures before Western contact, where with few exceptions, for example, the low-status Ainu ethnic minority in Japan, lighter skin tone confers higher status both within and between groups. But these intuitions are flimsy. First, while there are obvious biological contributions to racial differences, race is a biological continuum rather than a discrete category. For example, unless you cherry pick the data, genetic variation within race is generally as great as between races. And this really is no surprise when looking at the range of variation with a racial rubric. Compare Sicilians with Swedes or a Senegalese farmer with an Ethiopian herder. The evolutionary argument doesn't hold up either. Racial differences, which have only relatively recently emerged, are of little us them significance. They are of little us them significance. For the hunter-gatherers of our hominin history, the most different person you'd ever encounter in your life came from perhaps a couple of dozen miles away, while the nearest person of a different race lived thousands of miles away. There is no evolutionary legacy of humans encountering people of markedly different skin color. Okay. Discrimination by condiments. By condiments. People who like mustard and people who don't like mustard. Okay, furthermore, the notion of race as a fixed biologically based classification system doesn't work either. At various times in the history of the US Census, Mexican and Armenian were classified as distinctive races. Southern Italians were of a different race from Northern Europeans. Someone with one black great-grandparent and 7 white ones was classified as white in Oregon, but not Florida. This is race as a cultural rather than biological construct. Given facts like these, it is not surprising that racial us-them dichotomies are frequently trumped by other classifications. The most frequent is gender, which we can see as obviously showing up in our evolutionary growth. Recall the finding that it is more difficult to extinguish a conditioned fear association with an other than a same race face. Navarrete has shown that this occurs only when the conditioned faces are male. Gender outweighs race as an automatic classification in this case. Okay. So, yeah, if we're going to think of like our most fundamental social biases here, we have to think of probably gender over race. French fries as humanly and condiments as by racial flavor. Condiments, yes. Nice. Age as a classification readily trumps race as well. Even occupation can, for example, in one study, white subjects showed an automatic preference for white politicians over black athletes when they were primed to think about race, but the opposite when primed to think about occupation. So these are things that we can obviously see showing up in evolution, like different roles, different ages, different sexes. Race was not something that was as prevalent, but obviously race, just like any other identifier for our complex brains, can become something that we can, you know, create these biases from unknowingly. Yo, Jacob. United States versus them. Uh-oh. I'm going to get in trouble here. Maybe Justin Olympic hockey. You know what? That's what I'll say. Because I think that's 2 golds now, right? Sorry, just woke up not long ago. Sentence structure is kind of off. No worries. Ayo. Throwing shade. Okay. Race as a salient us-them category can be shoved aside by subtle reclassification. In one study, subjects saw pictures of individuals, each black or white, each associated with a statement, and then had to recall which face went with which statement. There was automatic racial categorization. If subjects misattributed a quote, the face picked and the one actually associated with the statement were likely to be of the same race. Next, half the black and half the white individuals pictured worse the same distinctive yellow shirt. The other half wore gray. Now subjects most often confused faces by shirt color. Okay. So this is, I couldn't really follow that, but I think I did, where the shirt color became more salient to the person than race did for identifying these. Okay, wonderful research by Wheeler and Fisk of Princeton showed how categorization is shifted, studying the phenomenon of amygdala activation by pictures of other race faces. In one group, subjects tried to find a distinctive dot in each picture, and other race face didn't activate the amygdala. Faceness wasn't being processed. In a second group, subjects judged whether each face looked older than some age. Amygdaloid responses to other race faces enlarged. Thinking categorically about age strengthened thinking categorically about race. In a third group, a vegetable was displayed before each face. Subjects judged whether the person liked that vegetable. The amygdala did not respond to other race faces. At least 2 interpretations come to mind to explain this last result. So this is where a vegetable was displayed before each face. Subjects judged whether the person liked that vegetable. The amygdala did not respond to the other race faces. So either distraction, subjects were too busy thinking about, say, carrots, to do automatic categorization by race. This would resemble the effect of searching for the dot. Or recategorization. You look at a them face, thinking about what food they like. You picture that person shopping, ordering a meal in a restaurant, sitting down to dinner at home and enjoying a particular food. In other words, you think of the person as an individual. This is the readily accepted interpretation. So this is priming us for the idea that if we want to combat these unconscious biases, to think of people in the outgroup as individuals. But recategorization can occur in the real world under the most brutal and unlikely circumstances. Here are examples that I find to be intensely poignant. In the Battle of Gettysburg, Confederate General Lewis Armistead was mortally wounded while leading a charge. As he lay on the battlefield, he gave a secret Masonic signal or sign in hopes of its being recognized by a fellow Mason. It was by a Union officer, Hiram Bingham, who protected him, got him to a Union field hospital, and guarded his personal effects. In an instant, the us and them of Union and Confederate became less important than that of Mason and non-Mason. Another shifting of thems also occurred during the Civil War. Both armies were filled with Irish immigrant soldiers. Irish typically had picked sides haphazardly, joining what they thought would be a short conflict to gain some military training, useful for returning home to fight for Irish independence. Before battle, Irish soldiers put identifying sprigs of green in their hats so that, should they lie dead or dying, they'd shed the arbitrary us-them of this American war and revert to the us that mattered, to be recognized and aided by their fellow Irish. A green sprig as a green beard. All right, and then I'm going to skip that next one. And then we got, and finally, there is the World War I Christmas truce, something I will consider at length in the final chapter. This is the famed event where soldiers on both sides spent the day singing, praying, and partying together, playing soccer, and exchanging gifts, and soldiers up and down the lines struggled to extend the truce. It took all of one day for British versus German to be subordinated to something more important. All of us in the trenches versus the officers in the rear who want us to go back to killing each other. Thus, us-them dichotomies can wither away into being historical trivia questions like the Kagos, and can have their boundaries shifted at the whims of a census. More importantly, we have multiple dichotomies in our heads, and ones that seem inevitable and crucial can, under the right circumstances, have their importance evaporate in an instant. Okay. Yes, men and women. Sorry, I'll stop distracting. So in California, at one time before 1972, and Nixon changed this, but if you were born to Mexican-American parents, the classification noted on the birth certificate was white, not when Nixon's administration added Hispanic or Mexican-American. Nixon himself grew up with Mexican-Americans, being from Southern California, having grown up with Mexican-Americans, felt like there should be a distinction between this idea of his idea of whiteness. Odd that the mental state is groggy when we just wake up from sleep. Kind of feels like needing to warm up the engine for true performance. Right. It could also, it could also be a sign of, perhaps less lower quality sleep. But I just don't know how long you slept and whether or not you were disrupted or whatnot. If you ate close to when you went to bed last night, there's all kinds of things that can affect how groggy you feel in the morning. Now, I want some steamed veggies with butter and salt. Absolutely. That's the stream meal of choice. I don't think you pronounce the G in poignant. Okay, thank you. Poignant? So it's like almost like poignant. Die peons. Yes, poignant. Oh, I see. Okay. Yep. March 4th and bring my glory by your deaths. Oh, die peons. Yep. World War I. Yep. All right. Cold and or incompetent. That both a gibbering schizophrenic homeless man and a successful businessman from a resented ethnic group can be a them demonstrates something crucial. Different types of thems evoke different feelings in us, anchored in differences in the neurobiologies of fear and disgust. As but one example, fear-evoking faces cause us to watch vigilantly, and activate the visual cortex. Disgust-evoking faces do the opposite. Okay. We carry various taxonomies in our heads as to our relationships with different types of others. Of course, this is unconscious. It could be affected by our conscious identity, or like what we feel like is our identity, but this plays out unconsciously in the moment. Thinking about some thems is simple. Consider someone who pushes all our judgmental buttons, say a homeless junkie whose wife threw him out of the house because of his abusiveness and who now mugs elderly people. Throw him under a trolley. People are most likely to agree to sacrifice one to save five when the five are in-group members and the one is this extreme of an out-group. Our famous trolley problem returns. But what about thems who evoke more complex feelings? Tremendously influential work has been done by Fisk with her stereotype content model. This entire section concerns that work. Okay. We tend to categorize thems along two axes. So this is, I don't know what the work was that led to these models, whether this was some sort of top-down model or if this was a statistical bottom-up model. We tend to categorize thems along two axes. Warmth is the individual or group a friend or foe, benevolent or malevolent, and competence. How effectively can the individual or group carry out their intentions? So this is like a real important topic that I would want to bring up when we're talking about these social heuristics or biases. And then I'll probably also ask, like, has anyone else made something similar or more effective, and how grounded is this, and, you know, all the other stuff. The axes are independent. Ask subjects to assess someone about whom they have only minimal information. Priming them with cues about the person's status alters ratings of competence, but not of warmth. Prime them about the person's competitiveness, and you do the opposite. These two axes produce a matrix with four corners. There are groups that we rate as being high in both warmth and competence, us, naturally. And Americans typically view this group as containing good Christians, African-American professionals, and the middle class. And there's the other extreme, low in both warmth and competence, our homeless, addicted mugger. Subjects typically hand out low warmth, low competence assessments for the homeless, people on welfare, and poor people of any race. Yikes. Then there's the high warmth, low competence categorization, the mentally disabled, people with handicaps, the elderly. And the categorization of low warmth and high competence, it's how people in the developing world tend to view the European culture that used to rule them. And how many minority Americans view whites. It's the hostile stereotype of Asian Americans by white America, of Jews in Europe, of Indo-Pakistanis in East Africa, of Lebanese in West Africa, and of ethnic Chinese in Indonesia, and to a lesser extent of rich people by poorer people everywhere. Okay, oh no, we got Mogs in the chat. What about someone who mogs people? Oh my gosh. It comes down to whether or not you feel like they're, you know, one of you or them. But yeah, people who mogs people, that would be something akin to the competitiveness. Like if you found out that this person mogs, then it'll prime, it'll alter the ratings of I guess warmth, but not competence. So yeah, actually, you know what? It depends if like, do you know that they actually mog, or when I put my own bias in there. If I heard that someone mogs or someone identifies as mogging, I'm thinking more about their competitiveness and not about their actual competence. I just think that this is like a character trait of their identifying as being better, which is making me think in that way rather than competence. They might even, you know what, maybe I think they're even less competent because they identify as mogging. I'm not sure. All right, first exposure to others begins with infancy. Yes. Us, me, and caregiver. Distrust of strangers' faces, smells, and sounds. We cling to caregivers, right? Caregivers really set us up for everything, or set everything up for us. and I shouldn't say everything. You know, they set a lot up for us. We still learn so much, and our frontal cortex doesn't stop developing until our, you know, into our 20s. So there's still certainly groups or identities that we can take up on, or take up, you know, all the way into our 20s. So, you know, our caregiver obviously becomes like a really fundamental figure, influence. But as this book said, like, when kids are adopted before, like by the age of 8, I think it was like that, they end up actually feeling more familiar with the race of the adopted parent or the new parent. So this is pointing out that comfort or familiarity with a race isn't something that's set by age 8. Okay. Staniel brain mogs us every stream and his carnage in here. Wonder if babies hate other babies for attention they receive. The other thing is, like, when we're talking about these cognitive biases, these are being shown for adults. Like, adults are the participants in these studies. We really don't know how this actually, no, you know what, he did bring up that kids automatically have us and thems. I take it back. I bet we could even find it. Should I go kid? No. I forget where it was, and I feel like I would have wanted to record that, but I don't remember. But yeah, no, it was. They could figure out that kids or even babies, yeah, did have that type of bias. Though it's probably not that significant. I don't think like babies have like a strong understanding of hate at that age. I think it's 18 months before you can conceptualize other people's minds, right? There's a whole discussion about theory of mind, and when babies have that level. That was a topic we discussed in the Embodied Cognition book. But yeah, I don't think we should extrapolate crazy conclusions based on some of these studies. All right, attention in the mental state of babies would be a resource of reassurance and care taken away from them by a fellow baby. Fair. At 9 months, they can track people's gaze and infer they are giving attention to something. Very cool. Yeah, it's crazy that like it takes them that long to understand gaze. And I guess it makes sense. Okay. Where are we at? Okay, and it's the same derogation. They're cold, greedy, cleverly devious, clannish, don't assimilate, have loyalties elsewhere. So this is the high warmth, low. No, this is the low warmth, high competence. So you like distrust, but they're competent. So cold, greedy, cleverly devious, clannish, don't assimilate, have loyalties elsewhere, but dang, they sure know how to make money, and you probably should go to one who is a doctor if you have something serious. So people tend toward consistent feelings evoked by each of the extremes. For high warmth, high competence, in other words, us, there's pride, low warmth, high competence, envy, high warmth, low competence, pity, low warmth, low competence, disgust. Stick someone in a brain scanner, show them pictures of low warmth, low competence people, and there's activation of the amygdala and insula, but not the fusiform face area or the emotional ventromedial prefrontal cortex. A profile evoked by viewing disgusting objects, although once again this pattern shifts if you get subjects to individuate asking them to think about what food this homeless person likes rather than anything they can find in garbage cans. In contrast, viewing low warmth, high competence or high warmth, low competence individuals activates the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. All right, the places between the extremes evoke their own characteristic responses. Individuals who evoke a reaction between pity and pride evoke a desire to help them. Floating between pity and disgust is a desire to exclude and demean. Between pride and envy is a desire to associate, to derive benefits from. And between envy and disgust are our most hostile urges to attack. What fascinates me is when someone's categorization changes. The most straightforward ones concern shifts from high warmth, high competence, so us, to we've got high warmth, low competence. This is watching a parent decline into dementia, a situation evoking extremes of poignant protectiveness. Then we got high warmth, high competence to low warmth, high competence. This is the business partner who turns out to have been embezzling for decades, betrayal, and the rare transition from us to them. A buddy who made partner in your law firm, but then something happened and now he's homeless. Disgust mingled with okay, so it's not just them, right? It's us to someone that you would feel bad about or feel bad for, the pity. The janitor whom you can no, wait, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, something happened and now he's homeless. Disgust mingled with bafflement. What went wrong? Equally interesting are shifts from other categorizations. There's when you shift your perception of someone from high warmth, low competence to low warmth, low competence. The janitor whom you condescendingly greet each day turns out to think you're a jerk. Ingrate. There's the shift from low warmth, low competence to low warmth, high competence. When I was a kid in the 60s, the parochial American view of Japan was low, both the shadow of World War II, generating dislike and contempt. Made in Japan was about cheap plastic and gewgaws. And then suddenly, made in Japan meant outcompeting American car and steel manufacturers. Whoa, a sense of alarm of being caught napping at your post. Then there's the shift from low competence, low warmth, low competence to high warmth, low competence. This is when a homeless guy finds someone's wallet and does cartwheels to return it, and you realize that he's more decent than half your friends. Most interesting to me is the transition from low warmth, high competence status to low warmth, low competence, which invokes gloating glee schadenfreude. I remember a great example of this in the 1970s when Nigeria nationalized its oil industry, and there was the delusionally misplaced, it turns out, belief that this would usher in wealth and stability. I recall a Nigerian commentator crowning with that within the decade, Nigeria would be sending foreign aid to its ex-colonial overlord, Great Britain. In other words, Brits would be shifting from low warmth, high competence to low warmth, low competence. And it makes them happy. All right, the glee explains a feature of persecution of low warmth, high competence outgroups, namely to first degrade and humiliate them to low warmth, low competence. During China's Cultural Revolution, resented elites were first paraded in dunce caps before being shipped to labor camps. Nazis eliminated the mentally ill, already LL, by unceremoniously murdering them. In contrast, pre-murder treatment of the low warmth, high competence Jews involved forcing them to wear degrading yellow armbands, to cut one another's beards, and to scrub sidewalks with toothbrushes before jeering crowds. Okay, I'm sorry, this is a bleak topic. Okay. Turning low warmth, high competence thems into low warmth, low competence thems accounts for some of the worst human savagery. Okay, these variations are sure more complicated than chimps associating rivals with spiders, which is something we talked about way before. One strange human domain is the phenomenon of developing a grudging respect, even a sense of camaraderie with an enemy. Okay, skipping ahead. And then there is the even stranger world of differing feelings about the economic versus the cultural enemy, the relatively new enemy versus the ancient one, or the distant alien enemy versus the neighboring enemy whose minuscule differences have been inflated. These are the differing subjugations that the British Empire inflicted on the Irish next door versus on Australian Aborigines. Bunch of other examples. Just pointing out that we've got, these different identities and different unconscious understandings of thems that shift and compete in some sense. Okay. Why does this remind me of Donny Boy? Schadenfreude, love it. Which part gave you the sense of Donny Boy? And then Schadenfreude, yep. Maybe it is in our makeup to always seek out others. Yeah, maybe. Did we get to that? Was that a topic yet? That like we need to do that, or that there's something that I don't know if that's a harder thing to prove. It's a harder thing to evidence for that we like get a plus out of it, or that we need to do it, as opposed to like we obviously like at a biological level, like it seems like our brain needs to do it, but and that's just like the heuristic that's guiding our unconscious thought. But is there some like using the phrasing that we need to do it implies that we like gain something else out of it other than simply that's how our brain, I mean obviously these heuristics do help us out all the time, and we just we need to be careful about where they help us out and where they don't help us out and where they make us worse people. Inclusivity is rarely something associated with humanity if you think about it. No, I think inclusivity is, oh, you mean just like fully inclusive, like inclusivity is something fundamentally associated with humanity, but that isn't to mean that full egalitarianism is something associated with humanity. Always must find another. Well, it's just that like that you could even go the Hegel route here. It's like the identity of us must be constituted by a difference with something else. Like there has to be something about us that makes us different than others. And usually it's just comfort at the end of the day. It's like these people, and the person that you just saw for the first time in your entire life, you don't know. So of course during our evolutionary development there would be a difference of the way that we would feel about that. Seems like sense of self and identity is fragile. That is true. I think without an other to distinguish you. Yeah, I don't know. I think yeah. I mean, it could be the case that anytime you're trying to make any type of moving up in the world, that you have to end up creating a them. You know what? So the next topic in this book, which we might want to actually just go straight into, is hierarchy. And maybe that's what's actually making it so that we have to have these us's and them's. Or I shouldn't say that's what's making it, but like that's a way that we can interpret keeping this thing going. Like even in a group, like imagine even in a group where everyone knows everyone and you're not getting any external people coming in, because of these hierarchy changes, and like human hierarchies aren't set. There's constant changes in how we think about these different hierarchies, and there's not like a single hierarchy. It's like you've got hierarchies of all kinds that are affecting how you talk about things and behave in front of people. Like these are very dynamic, so that could make all kinds of categorizations of groups required or necessary. And I'm not saying this in terms of like what ought to be the case. I'm saying like this is just, perhaps this is a way we can understand these automatic heuristics. Okay, some of my best friends. The honorable enemy phenomenon raises another domain of human peculiarity. Even if he could, no chimp would ever deny that the neighboring chimps remind him of spiders. None would feel bad about it, urge others to overcome that tendency, teach their children to never call one of those neighboring chimps a spider. None would proclaim that he can't distinguish between us chimps and them chimps. And these are all commonplace in progressive Western cultures. Young humans are like chimps. 6-year-olds do not 6-year-olds not only prefer to be with kids like themselves by whatever criteria, but readily say so. It isn't until around age 10 that kids learn that some feelings and thoughts about thems are expressed only at home, that communication about us and them is charged and contextual. Yikes. This is why kids are brutal. Thus, there can be striking discrepancies in us and them relationships or relations between what people claim they believe and how they act. Consider differences between election poll results and election results. This is shown experimentally as well. In one depressing study, subjects claimed they'd be very likely to proactively confront someone expressing racist views, yet actual rates were far lower when they were unknowingly put in that position. Note, this is not to say that this reflected racist sentiments. Instead, it likely reflected social norm inhibitions being stronger than the subject's principles. Right. Okay. Attempts to control and repress us and them. Antipathies. How do we say this? Antipathies. I'm gonna guess. That's my
antipathy.
Oh, on. All right. Us, them, antipathies have the frontal cortex written all over them. As we saw, a subliminal 50 millisecond exposure to the face of another can activate the amygdala, and if exposure is long enough for conscious detection, the initial amygdala activation is followed by prefrontal cortex activation and amygdala damping. So the prefrontal cortex is going to inhibit the amygdala here. About 500 milliseconds or more it takes. Wow. The more prefrontal cortex activation, particularly of the cognitive dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the more amygdala silencing. It's the prefrontal cortex regulating discomfiting? What is this word?
Discomfort.
Discomfort? Make feel uneasy. Discomfiting. Okay. Behavioral data also implicate the frontal cortex. For example, for the same degree of implicit racial prejudice, the bias is more likely to be expressed behaviorally in individuals with poor frontal executive control, as shown with an abstract cognitive task. Chapter 2 introduced the concept of cognitive load, where a taxing frontal executive task diminishes performance on subsequent frontal task. On a subsequent task. This occurs with us and theming. White subjects do better on certain behavior tests when the tester is white as opposed to black. Subjects whose performance declines most dramatically in the latter scenario show the greatest dorsolateral prefrontal cortex activation when viewing other race faces. All right. I don't think we have to go as deep into the you know what? We should talk about inhibition through the prefrontal cortex here. This would be something that we would discuss perhaps in navigating biases and heuristics. The cognitive load generated by frontal executive control during interracial interactions can be modulated. If white subjects are told most people are more prejudiced than they think they are before taking the test with a black tester, performance plummets more than if they're told most people perform worse on a frontal cortical cognitive test than they think they did. Moreover, if white subjects are primed with a command reeking of frontal regulation, avoid prejudice during an interracial interaction, performance declines more than when they are told to have a positive intercultural exchange. Okay. A different type of executive control can occur in minority thems when dealing with individuals of the dominant culture. Be certain to interact with them in a positive manner to counter their assumed prejudice against you. In one startling study, African American subjects were primed to think about either racial or age prejudice, followed by an interaction with someone white. When the prime was racial, subjects became more talkative, solicited the other person's opinion more, smiled more, and leaned forward more. The same did not occur when subjects interacted with another African American. Okay. 2 points are worth making about these studies about executive control and interactions with thems. Frontal cortical activation during an interracial interaction could reflect A, being prejudiced and trying to hide it, B, being prejudiced and feeling bad about it, C, feeling no prejudice and working to communicate that, D, who knows what else. Activation merely implies that the interracial nature of the interaction is weighing on the subject and prompting executive control, implicitly or otherwise. Okay. Yeah, as per usual, subjects in these studies were mostly university students fulfilling some Psych 101 requirement. In other words, individuals of an age associated with openness to novelty, residing in a privileged place where us, them, cultural and economic differences are less than in society at large, and where there is not only institutionalized celebration of diversity, but also some actual diversity. Beyond the university's homepage with the obligatory picture of smiling, conventionally good-looking students of all races and ethnicities peering in microscopes, plus, for good measure, a cheerleader type fawning over a nerdy guy in a wheelchair. That even this population demonstrates more implicit antipathy to thems than they like to admit is pretty depressing. Okay. Whew. Us and them reminds me of one Hindu text kept saying enlightenment is not setting this against that, but can't remember which one. Us them would be a fatal flaw to introduce into AI, though. Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like us and them must be in AI if it's pervasive in humans. But it would be different. You know what? Yeah, you know what? I couldn't say that. That doesn't make any sense. Us and them is we're talking about like heuristics for a human brain here. We're not talking about like categorization more abstractly. So yeah, like AIs could, yeah, these LLMs could tell you about different prejudices, but it wouldn't. I don't know. Like it would be primed to just take up probably what's the most popular one if you were to ask it, and if these companies didn't actually tell it not to do so, which is that's got to be part of their, you know, other than Grok, that's got to be part of their master prompt. Maybe a less human AI, please. I think the Ashtavakra Gita antihistamines. Okay, manipulating the extent of us and theming. Finally, we get to the fun part. We get to the uplifting part, I think. What situations lessen or exacerbate us and theming? I define lessen as a decreased antipathy towards thems and or decreased perception of the size of importance of contrast between us and them. Here are some brief summaries, a warm-up for the final 2 chapters. All right. The subterranean forces of cueing and priming. Subliminally flash a picture of a hostile and or aggressive face, and people are subsequently more likely to perceive a them as the same, an effect that does not occur in group. Prime subjects subliminally with negative stereotypes of thems, and you exacerbate theming. All right, these are things we obviously know, or obviously can intuit. Moreover, implicit racial bias is lessened after subliminal exposure to counter stereotypes, faces of popular celebrities of that race. Okay. Such priming can work within seconds to minutes and can persist. For example, the counter stereotype effect lasted at least 24 hours. Priming can also be extraordinarily abstract and subtle, An example concerned differences in EEG responses in the brain when looking at same versus different race faces. In the study, the other race response lessened if subjects unconsciously felt they were drawing the person toward them if they were pulling a joystick toward themselves at the time. Crazy. This is how to be less racist. Finally, priming is not equally effective at altering all domains of theming. It is easier to subliminally manipulate warmth than competence ratings. It's good to know. These can be powerful effects, and to be more than merely semantic, the malleability of automatic responses, for example, of the amygdala, shows that automatic does not equal inevitable. Hell yeah. That's another thesis of, or theme of the document here, of what we're trying to do. All right, the conscious cognitive level. Various overt strategies have been found to decrease implicit biases. A classic one is perspective taking, which enhances identification with them. For example, in a study concerning age bias, having subjects take the perspective of older individuals more effectively reduced bias than merely instructing subjects to inhibit stereotypical thoughts. Another is to consciously focus on counter stereotypes. In one study, automatic sexual biases were lessened more when men were instructed to imagine a strong woman with positive attributes than when they were instructed to attempt stereotype suppression. Another strategy is to make implicit biases explicit, show people evidence of their automatic biases. More to come concerning these strategies. All right. This is why things like representation are so important. All right, changing the rank ordering of us-them categories. This refers to the multiple us-them dichotomies we carry and the ease of shifting their priority. Shifting which categorization is at the forefront isn't necessarily a great thing and may just constitute 6 of one, half of a dozen the other. For example, among European American men, a photograph of an Asian woman applying makeup makes gender automaticity stronger than ethnic automaticity, while a picture of her using chopsticks does the opposite. More effective than getting people to shift a them of one category into merely another type of them, of course, is to shift the them to being perceived as an us, emphasizing attributes in common. All right. Which brings us to contact. In the 1950s, the psychologist Allport proposed contact theory. The inaccurate version is if you bring us's and them's together, say teenagers from two hostile nations brought together in a summer camp, or white football players and black football players in a summer camp, animosities disappear, similarities become more important than differences, and everyone becomes an us. The more accurate version, put us's and them's together under very narrow circumstances and something sort of resembling that happens, but you can also blow it and worsen things. So, yeah, I guess, what was the movie I'm trying to talk about here? Denzel Washington, what's that classic? Remember the Titans. That's kind of what's going on with the second one, where there's a very narrow circumstance that the us's and them's are coming together, and fortunately for the movie, something sort of resembling animosities disappearing happens. So it's like semi-realistic, according to this theory, whatever is at 71 here. Casually dropping reference 71 of the chapter, mind you, not even of the book. Okay. Some of those effective, narrower circumstances. Oh, actually, I should take this whole thing because I might want to look that up later. Some of those effective narrower circumstances. Those are roughly there are roughly equal members from each side. Everyone's treated equally and unambiguously, which, to be fair, and remember the Titans, they were very good about. Contact is lengthy and on neutral, benevolent territory. There are superordinate goals where everyone works together on a task they care about. All right, so this is, you know, very much that movie. If anyone hasn't seen that movie, highly recommend. K-pop stars. Yo, the Beldam. What's good? Hello. Good strong women characters in movies. Ripley from Aliens. Bad strong women characters in movies. Cruella from The 101 Dalmatians. I don't think that's a point people usually make, but you might be, you know, you might be onto something there. Essentialism versus individuation. Individuation. This harks back to two important earlier points. First, that thems tend to be viewed as homogeneous, simple and having an unchangeable and negative essence. Second, that being forced to think of a them as an individual can make them seem more like an us. Decreasing essentialist thinking via individuation is a powerful tool. One elegant study showed this. White subjects were given a questionnaire assessing the extent of their acceptance of racial inequalities after being given one of two primes. The first bolstered essentialist thinking about race as invariant and homogeneous, or homogeneous. Scientists pinpoint the genetic underpinning of race. Okay, the other prime was anti-essentialist. Scientists reveal that race has no genetic basis. Being primed toward essentialism made subjects more accepting of racial inequalities. So less accepting of, of the other race. All right, hierarchy. Predictably, making hierarchy steeper, more consequential, or more overt worsens theming. The need for justification fuels those on top to pour the stereotypes of, at best, high warmth, low competence, or worse, low warmth, low competence onto the heads of those struggling at the bottom, and those on the bottom reciprocate with the simmering time bomb that is the perception of the ruling class as low warmth, high competence. Okay. Is there anything here? Yo, the Beldam. Welcome. Thanks for the follow. We'll be talking about random science stuff, self-help stuff, and hopefully practical things that we can do every day. And then often consciousness, which is not as practical as it is just a guilty pleasure of the stream. Okay. Individual differences in how people feel about hierarchy help explain variation in the extent of theming. This is shown in studies examining social dominance orientation, how much someone values prestige and power and right-wing authoritarianism. We went over this yesterday, 2 days ago, which is how much someone values centralized authority, the rule of law, and convention. Higher SDO individuals show the greatest increases in automatic prejudices when feeling threatened, more acceptance of bias against low-status outgroups. If male, more tolerance of sexism. And as discussed, people high in SDO and or in RWA are less bothered by hostile humor about outgroups. Related to our all being part of multiple us and them dichotomies is our simultaneous membership in multiple hierarchies. No surprise, people emphasize the importance of the hierarchy in which they rank highest. Being captain of the company's weekend softball team takes on more significance than the lousy, lowly 9-to-5 job during the week. So this is like the, okay, hierarchy. Oh, this is just part of the chapter. This might be where I literally left off. Oh, no, okay, we have conclusions. All right, we're good. We're chilling. In those cases, those on top tend to emphasize the convergence of the hierarchies and the importance of assimilating the values of the core hierarchy. For example, why can't they all just call themselves Americans instead of ethnicity Americans? Interestingly, this is a local phenomenon. Whites tend to favor assimilationist, unitary adherence to national values, while African Americans favor more pluralism. However, the opposite occurs concerning campus life and policies among white and African American students at traditionally black universities. We can keep two contradictory things in our head at the same time if that works for our benefit. All right. And then, of course, we always have that post hoc justification just to make us feel good about it, you know? Yo, Daniel ends. Stantra the mantra. The mantra. Stantra the mantra. I am Stan today. All right, thus, in order to lessen the adverse effects of us and theming, a shopping list would include emphasizing individuation and shared attributes, perspective taking, more benign dichotomies, lessening hierarchical differences, and bringing people together on equal terms with shared goals. All to be revisited, which I have yet to get to. Did we figure out how to defeat the thems yet? I think we just defeated racism. We just defeated the concept of thems right here. This is how you defeat them bias. This is like the conclusion that we just arrived, or like we just talked through all these things. Actually defeating the thems, you know, depends on what the them category is. All right, the conclusions. I might as well just read the conclusions. An analogy concerning health. Stress can be bad for you. We no longer die of smallpox or the plague and instead die of stress-related diseases of lifestyle like heart disease or diabetes where damage slowly accumulates over time. It is understood how stress can cause or worsen disease or make you more vulnerable to other risk factors. Much of this is even understood on the molecular level. Stress can even cause your immune system to abnormally target hair follicles, causing your hair to turn gray. All true, yet stress researchers do not aim to eliminate, to cure us of stress. It can't be done, and even if it could, we wouldn't want that. We love stress when it's the right kind. We call it stimulation. The analogy is obvious. From massive, breathtaking barbarity to countless pinpricks of microaggression, us versus them has produced oceans of pain. Yet our generic goal is not to cure us of us-them dichotomizing. It can't be done unless your amygdala is destroyed, in which case everyone seems like an us. But even if we could, we wouldn't want to eliminate us versus theming, or us and theming. I'm a fairly solitary person. After all, I've spent a significant... Oh, this is what I was talking about. I spent a significant amount of time of my life studying a different species from my own, living alone in a tent in Africa. Yet some of the most exquisitely happy moments of my life have come from feeling like an us, feeling accepted and not alone, safe and understood, feeling part of something enveloping and larger than myself, filled with a sense of being on the right side and doing both well and good. There are even us and thems that I, eggheady, meek, and amorphously pacifistic, would be willing to kill or die for. If we accept that there will always be sides, it's a non-trivial to-do list item to always be on the side of angels. Distrust essentialism. Keep in mind that what seems like rationality is often just rationalization, playing catch-up with subterranean forces that we never suspect. Focus on the larger shared goals. Practice perspective taking. Individuate, individuate, individuate. Recall the historical lessons of how often the truly malignant thems keep themselves hidden and make third parties the fall guy. And in the meantime, give the right of way to people driving cars with the mean people suck bumper sticker and remind everyone that we're all in it together against Lord Voldemort and the House Slytherin. All right. As you can see, Sapolsky's got a sense of humor. And then I am currently reading Hierarchy of Obedience and Resistance, which perhaps we have as a topic some other day. I am that far in probably rank and hierarchy in humans, maybe. No, I definitely got there, right? Nope, that's where I'm at. Okay. Because I probably would have highlighted something else. So we get to do. I mean, this is another social bias or heuristic that we have to add into the social heuristics subsection here. So I'm probably we might have to do the exact same thing. Yeah. No, this is a daily stream. Obedience, my favorite subject. Hell yeah. Yeah, we're usually just chilling. Oh, see you later, Adam tuned in. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah. All right, I think I might call it there. I think that was all that we needed to do. You know what? I should show off. What do we have time? I don't think we have time in this month. Maybe Saturday? Could we do that? Could we do a Saturday? How about that? Saturday, if I'm around, we'll do hierarchy and obedience. And maybe this will be a longer stream. Maybe it'll be an earlier stream. I'm not sure. Tomorrow, we want to do a full taxonomy of cognitive biases. We want to know them all. And then we should figure out which ones we actually care to talk about. Like, which ones are most practical for us to know about or be aware of. And yeah, that'll probably take up 2 days. Wednesday, somewhat unrelated to what we've been talking about, but I just wanted to, we could do something else also after we do this. I don't think it's going to take that long, but just going back to this idea of the triune brain, like the idea that we've got like a newer layer of like human level neocortex thinking, like rational thinking on top of the emotional brain, on top of the lizard brain. We've seen that isn't really how it works. The neurons that we have in our neocortex are quite similar genetically to neurons that we find in other species that we think are not smart. So we found out that really what's the difference between humans and those other species is really the amount of time that part of the brain develops. So it's as if like there's a different development workflow within different species that tells the cells how long they should be developing. Different aspect. Like I don't understand how that really works, but the part of the part of our brain that obviously we think of as like the neocortex just develops for longer than other species. But we went that whole route, and then I'm just kind of curious, like a discussion about how we can speak about evolutionarily older regions while not insinuating strict triune. So like, can we still say like that the what we describe as the limbic system is still like evolutionarily older? What's the actual discrepancy there? This could take literally 20 minutes, so I don't even know if this can be like our topic. So maybe we'll have something else. And then Thursday, Friday, document roast. I think we're going to just start reading through the document, the prologue, part 1, prologue, the collective knowledge of the world, and then we get to roast it. And what I mean by that is like try to revise it or to point out things that I think is silly, and then maybe I'll revise it off stream, stuff like that. So if anyone wants to give specific feedback to the document while we do this, feel free. I mean, you could give feedback anytime, but yeah. And then hierarchy, we've got Sunday marks the first day of meditation month. I don't know if Dharmadam's here, but if you responded, I haven't. I got to still check. But I tried filling out next month topics for next month. Next month, yeah, as meditation month, we've got a bunch of meditation topics. If anyone wants to see this calendar, by the way, all you have to do is go to the my link tree. Do I have like a link tree? Do I have a link? No, I don't. Do I have links? No. What's the usual? I know I have the Discord, but like, how else do I get links? Oh, bottom left of the stream. There we go, link tree. That's how you get to it. There's a calendar there. You could always, at any time, you could see this. This is always the way I plan for what the topic is going to be coming up. Okay. Obedience, my favorite subject. Trick about obedience is to make them think it's their idea. Very nice. Inception, if you will. The I'm never wrong bias. The gaslight bias. What time is it? Oh, what time is the stream? The stream is usually 6:30 EST. So I don't know what that is. Any other time zone? Usually starts 2 hours ago, right? Yep. Backtrack the time in your time zone. Don't want to miss the stream. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Streams usually last 2 hours to 2.5. And if we can somehow eventually get rid of my job, then they can last much longer. All right, so 7 p.m. Canada. If you have Discord, there's notifications for stream. Oh, true. Yeah, that's a good point. With me around, there's things always get silly. Hell yeah, whether they like to or not. All right, with all this said, I think we call it. We call it for the night. Yeah, thanks everyone for chilling. We'll be chilling tomorrow, and have a good rest of the day.